Okay, we're going to cover section 2.5. This is going to be multiple videos. The first one we're going to do is solving quadratics by factoring. That says the first thing you need to understand is the difference between an equation and an expression. An equation will have an equal sign. You will also see the word solve. You can solve an equation. An expression you cannot solve, you can only simplify it. So if there's no equal sign with an expression, you can't solve for x unless there's truly an equal sign in the equation, because there has to be an equal sign in an equation. All right, so we're going to factor and solve the equation x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. And the first thing I'm going to do is break this down into two parentheses. And it's going to be set equal to 0 because we're going to be able to solve for x. So the x squared is going to be a representation of x and x. This is the easiest kind because there's no coefficient in front of the x, which is a number in front of the x squared. The next thing we're going to use is the last term. They do have to be in order from the highest exponent to the lowest, and this exponent of x is 0. So we have to use this next one, the -6, to decide what these next two numbers are. 6 could give us, in product for 6 are 6 times 1, or we could have 3 times 2. Based on these two numbers or these two numbers, their addition or subtraction would need to give us a positive 1. So if I added 6 and 1 or subtracted 6 and 1, I cannot get 1 for an answer because the coefficient of this x is 1. I need the subtraction or addition to be 1. 3 plus 2 is 5. That's not going to work, but 3 minus 2 is 1. So 3 and 2 are our next terms we're going to use. Finally, we do have a negative sign here. So either the 3 needs to be negative or the 2 needs to be negative. Now, the best way I like to explain this is if you learned how to do the FOIL system, this is where because it's F first, outer, inner, last. I like to use OI. I like to use OI because OI is just the outer 2x and the inner 3x. That's all we need to decide who gets what sign. All right. Because the middle term is positive, the 3x needs to be positive because remember, when you have different signs, you subtract and take the sign of the larger number. So the 3x needs to be positive and the 2 needs to be negative. All right. That will give us a 1x, which is what our middle term is. Last piece of this, because there's an equal sign here, I can set each of these binomials equal to 0 and solve for x. So x plus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 2 equal to 0. Okay. Be careful. Many times people will just be like, they'll just write down the answer without thinking through it. You have to subtract 3 from both sides of the equal sign in order to solve for x. So our first answer is x equals -3. And then we're going to add 2 to both sides. X equals +2. So we have 2 answers here. I knew we were going to have 2 answers because we had our highest exponent of 2, which means we're going to have 2 answers. All right, let's go to the next one, the try it. I would like to give you a chance to try this one yourself and then come back and see how I do it. Okay. Please pause the video and do this one yourself and then come back and see. All right, so I'm going to start with my x's because this is coefficient of 1. Now, I just told you a while ago that 6 will give us 6 times 1 or 3 times 2. I need the number to be 5. So I'm not going to be adding the 2 because I've got a negative number, a negative here and here. So it can't be 3 times 2. It'd have to be 6 and 1. And I'll show you that with my OI. So 1x, inner is 6x. I need my middle term to be negative, so my 6x needs to have a negative because when you combine them, the signs are different. You subtract and take the sign of the larger number. And that's what I needed for my middle term. So my 6 needs to be negative and my 1 needs to be positive. Once I get this set up, I can just take each of these binomials, set them equal to 0. I'm going to add 6 to both sides. There's 1. Subtract 1 from both sides. So my answers are x is equal to 6 or x is equal to -1. All right, let's go to example 2. It's solve the quadratic equation by factoring. So that's all it wants us to do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and break it into 2 parentheses. We're solving because there's an equal sign. My x's, there's no coefficient of x but 1. 15. 15 only breaks down into 15 and 1, which is not going to give us 8, or 5 times 3, which when you add them, and I know they're both positive because everything in here is positive, so therefore both binomials are going to be positive. Now I just need to solve for each one. There's a few little tricks. One of them is if everything's positive, that means both your binomials are positive. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So x is going to equal -5. Subtract 3 from both sides. X is equal to -3. All right. Now I'd like to give you a chance to try this next one yourself. And then once I do this one, we're going to create a new video. Pause the video, do this one, and then come back and see how I did it. All right, my coefficient of x squared is just 1, so x and x. 21 can be 21 and 1, which will not get us 4, or 7 and 3. If you don't know your multiplication skills, you're going to struggle with this. So do your best to learn them along with this if you don't have it knowledge. All right, let's check our OI because we've got 2 negatives here, so we need to do that. The outer is 3x, the inner is 7x. My middle term needs to be negative, so the larger number needs to be negative. When the signs are different, you subtract and take the sign of the larger number. So my 7 needs to be negative and my 3 positive. Now let's set them each equal to 0 and solve for x. We're going to add 7 to both sides. X is equal to 7. Subtract 3 from both sides. X is equal to -3. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions.